Hi. The beginning of our time together is in meditation because move my chair over a bit so that there we go. And it's so interesting before anyone gets on the call, you can feel the air shift and you can feel the sensory data. Yeah, sensory data. I think that's a beginning phrase I'd like to use today. You can feel the sensory data. Good morning, Sylvie. Sensory data isn't word data. It's sensory. It's where you have the sensation or the sense of something. And it's interesting now. Every Friday when I come on at 8, there's this sensory data. It's like hearing the right before you hear music. I flew in yesterday and to pick up a ritual object and from Dom and Her, and then no, I flew in the day before. And then I did my class in Denver and then flew out yesterday. So it was an in and out. So Kaya didn't have to drive down here and bring the ritual object in the midst of all the chaos she's in right now, trying to get herself sorted to get to California. Good morning. So I'm back home. So I want us to take a moment to consider a term, sensory data. And good morning. So just want us to consider the term sensory data. Good morning. It's great being at your house, Electra. We get we use terminology and then sometimes the terminology, good morning, the terminology becomes conceptual or uh, a, 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 we use it to apply to a thought or to apply to a logic, but we lose touch with the tonality. We live we lose touch with the resonance or the tonality. So words we use in the work of Tantra Modern and the LOC Institute, one of them is sentient intelligence. But this morning we're going to not let those two words um, become mental concepts. We're going to address sensory data. We're going to because those two terms haven't been reconfigured into a logic, into a concept. And basically, sensory data which is sensory is much harder to get your head around because sensory can be sensations or sensitivities. It can be smell, taste. Good morning, my beloved Praline. Smell, taste, sight, hearing. So this morning, and now before or right as I come on Facebook Live, I am in a field of sensory data. So I just really know that our mental mind, our mental word-based mind needs a break. It actually needs a break for about 6 years, if you don't mind. So I want you to really think about coming into this field, this sacred space for rest and courage. And really think sensory data and see if there's correlate between the two words sensory data, which obviously you can't conceptualize. You'll try your mental word-based obsessive compulsive neural pathways will try to conceptualize it, try to give it meaning, or but if you feel your brain or you feel your skin, that's or you feel the air around you or the sun on my case, the sun on my shoulder, or the sounds in the distance or up close, or the smell of the fragrances or incense. That's part of sensory data. If you hear music or sounds or but the important part of sensory data is that it opens up neural passages of your mind that are both the brain nerve neural network, which is the physical neural network, but it opens up the sensation of beyond that. So remember we were going to spend these weeks having this conversation. So last Friday when we met, we talked, we addressed, and gave the opportunity for an experience to kind of be in the world and not of it, to be able to sit where we're sitting and actually look in on the physical world and to ask ourselves the question, not to get the answer, but to literally open up the neural passageways of our brain that is both physical and non-physical of our but our brain is both physical and non-physical. The reason the Egyptians wore conal headdresses and wore headdresses was that the need for the golden mesh activation and activation 2, I think I have it on my store, that they needed that golden mesh. They needed that neural gold mesh brain that overlays, works in tandem with um, the survival brain. Electra had a conversation with me when I was there. It was so brilliant. I did record it. Part of it, we didn't record much of it. I'm going to send it to her to unpack. But she made the statement, and I'm really going to give you the statement for your own inquiry. Because I was talking about the amygdala. I seem to have a fairly profound relationship with the amygdala. You can look it up if you don't know what it is, or somebody can put a link on here to how to get what the amygdala is. But the amygdala is the primitive, people sometimes call it the part of the lizard brain. Lizard, is it an organ or gland? The lizard gland. But it's really when that day that I knew it didn't matter, I could get the vaccine and it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't affect my system, yay or nay. It'd be like I never had it. No, I realize that. And that something I was connecting to wasn't about my own survival, wasn't even about me. I was being connected into something that had the amygdala calm down, and my whole fight or flight, thank you, Anne, my whole fight or flight, screw it or kill it, panic, freeze, part of my solar plexus went calm. Everything went calm in my system. And the metaphor, the imaginative, mystical, imaginative phrase that came to mind was the mother says, do this. But it wasn't for my survival, because I don't think it made any difference. I don't think our vaccines made any difference. And there's people that think we made us more susceptible. I'll let you do whatever you do with that. But I didn't do it to protect myself. I did it because it lined up with a greater nature of experience and an interactive, interrelated, symbiotic experience with higher vibrational fields of intent. That's an important phrase. It lined up with higher vibrational fields of intent. In other words, creation itself. So this is like that. This is, oh, I wanted to say about Electra. What was so fascinating was I was talking about the amygdala because we're looking at these chapters on the meta body. And I'm going to misquote her, but you can write it down better for me, Electra, or better for us. But she basically said, well, the amygdala has a high end too. It isn't just the primitive lizard survival freak out, that it actually has a higher intent. Isn't that interesting? And the minute she said it, I went back to my recall of the morning I got the vaccine because I could definitely map on that what she said fit with the experience I had of my amygdala, that midbrain, hippocampus, hypothalamus, midbrain, amygdala. I could definitely map it onto that my amygdala presenced me into a higher intent. That's sensory data. Thank you, Kristen. Beautiful. Well done. Carefully crafted statement. Put a dash between carefully and crafted. You got it. So I have a body of people um, that I asked. So what happens in the work I do is I have me from where I'm standing. I have me, and then I pad around me certain people, like Praline's padded around me, and Daryl, Georgia Dow, Electra, Kea. There's certain people immediately packed around me. Because you could say we're often on the hot seat about things over time. Some uh, some of you also are feeling because it's not an identity choice of another human being. It's literally, if you think of a spiral, it's like the address you find people at. So let's say I'm in the beginning of the spiral where I'm standing, just like you're in the beginning of yours. And then as it begins to spiral, there's a resonant marker for others that are inside that core place with you, and then it just keeps going and going, but it's all important. So it's feels within feels within feels, or recursions within recursions within recursions. And then some people move from the outer realm where they're busy, and then they come in for specific energetic moments. This is how we work. This is how humanity works. And I'm just going to address it a little bit because it's not conceptual for the most part. It's not something that human beings conceptualize because for them, they're walking out to the edge and they're walking back. They don't know that they're part of a wave of energy that undulates and moves in with each other. If you read Deepak Chopra, he has a lot of work on this. I'm not going to try to do it. But basically, for me, because we all live as water in the same ocean, sometimes the water from the Pacific comes into where I am in the Atlantic, and sometimes and the beings connect that are the raindrops or the water drops of that water come in with it, and some have taken up uh, a have built an island around my island uh, where they pay attention to me and I pay attention to them. And I'm not sure I can conceptualize that for you. There's not really an equivocation. I was in a conversation last night, and I and someone was talking to me, a medical doctor was talking to me about my opinion about the vaccine, and I just said I don't have one. I have an operational state with myself regarding where the physical and non-physical realms of creation come together, but somehow the vaccine's like a little not of much matter there. And then she kept trying to logic it, and I finally had to say, I'm just not in the same logic. It's not your logic isn't wrong. It just isn't giving. It isn't giving the world I'm in. It isn't giving. It isn't giving me the world I'm in. It's giving you the world you're in, and I'm fine with that. I just don't have a. I just don't have a bridge over to that world, and not that it's right or wrong. I just don't have a bridge. So I guess you could say that this kind of undulating. So we have a thing called WhatsApp thread in the field of Tantra Mind. Everybody's welcome to join. It's in this because this particular Facebook page doesn't go public ever. It's very all of you on here are because I want you here because you're important to me in the scheme of things, and you're part of this undulating water drop that you are that actually beyond the personality framework you live in has this sensory capacity, has this sentient state of being. And that sentient state of being doesn't operate in a conceptual realm, it operates in sensory data. That means you can feel your brain. It has physical activity. You can feel your gut stir or your brain tighten, or you can feel a fuzz in your brain. There's physical sensations, but they're always sensations. They're not explanations. They're not conceptual explanations. So so last week when I felt this state shift happen in the Facebook Live, it's like a door opened beyond the conceptual, logical system of perception that everybody's trying to solve the world's problems with, which is just basically the world problem itself. But all of a sudden, this door opened. This I don't know. We can call it many things. Gateway open. There was an opening. That'd be the easiest way to address it, I think. And I could feel that myself and others, those of you on the call, I could feel that it was an open. It was open. I don't think I have any idea of the it, except for the fact that our consciousness doesn't require circumstance. Write that down. Our consciousness doesn't require circumstance. It doesn't have anything to do with circumstance. Our consciousness can perpetually be observing circumstance and thought without it being influenced. These are, if y'all can, somebody write it on the chat. So consciousness exists beyond circumstance. And consciousness is not affected by circumstance or thought, word thought. And one of the ways we have an experience of being conscious, not conscious in order to handle something or in order to get somewhere. One way we have the experience of being conscious is these meta states of sensory data, a sensation, a, a sense of presence in our own brain, a sense of the solar plexus region calming, a sense of being here. Thank you, Kristen. And the other one is our conscious is not influenced by circumstance or thought, word thought. So just ponder on that. And I think you'll find between now and next Friday that you'll get a separation. You'll have a sense of separation between circumstance and word thought and your consciousness. Your consciousness, not consciousness itself. I think it's important, but we're not going to go that route today. I think it's important for human beings to get us sentient, to restore or to reactivate or to build their sentient intelligence, because the way our word language has constructed our neural pathways is that it the it doesn't allow passage. The way our word thought organizes itself doesn't allow us passage into our consciousness. And thank God our consciousness is independent of that. Thank goodness. So last Friday, something occurred, and that a consciousness I was in that I could not get access to if I didn't have access to my own consciousness. But it was a type of consciousness, using type very generically. It was a type of consciousness that was opened up into because of the collective on this call. So, Kristen, if you don't mind, keep typing. So what happened last Friday, you don't have to type this, is there's a consciousness opened up that gathered itself. You could say there was an attractor that opened us up into a consciousness that we collectively resonated within. It's not quite the right phrase, so let me go for that. In other words, we were one, but not one redacted into one. Sorry, but one redacted into one. Clear? Somebody answer me. So not redacted into one, but opened up into one. See if you can register that. So when I came to sit down today, I wasn't trying to sit down and go into this Om and restore that linkage. When I sat down, thank you, Liz. When I sat down, the linkage was already there. And the sensory data, which I'm now asking you to sit with, and you want a single hand after the one, Christine, and then the double hand after the other one. So the phenomenon is that something is occurring consistent with linear time on Friday mornings at 8 a.m. Mountain and whatever your time zone is, so that we as one are, we don't have English for this. I just wrote, somebody see if you can figure out the English of this. I'm very curious about if we can figure out an English for this. Because we go from this to that, but that is held in this. But this is, yeah, I think it is a collective consciousness, but we want to be careful with already existing words, because the collective consciousness is like a little bit to me like sourdough bread. It doesn't make anything. I mean, you have to bake it to make something. So it becomes like a place people stop in their thinking. Yeah. Where the collective ones are unified as one consciousness. Yeah, that gets closer. Keep working on it. Because we actually really need to articulate what we're present to, because then the word mind, yes, it is, because the word mind begins to get capable of opening the doorway or presencing the doorway. But how we register it is through sensory data. The sensation can be the back, in my case, it's a spiritual antenna in the back of my head, get really fluttery like butterflies. And I usually have a sense of my crown chakra being vibrationally like an opera singer. So figure out yours. Just we're going to really go slow. This is my time to sit in a space, a sacred space for rest and courage. Yes. It's an interesting thing, Kristen, because what would it be like to put whole dash ness and to look up the definition of ness? Yeah, yes, and that's very much it. It's like the golden meme. This is the part I don't know how to put in language because the day I was born, I register in whole systems. So it's harder for me to come all the way down into how the systems become. I like this particular time, Gail. Yeah, I like the collective consciousness of this particular time. That makes tears come to my eyes and my gut quivers. That's sensory data. It makes me want to cry. It has an elicitation in the body of a register. And that's what we're after. We're after the elicitation of the body as a register of sensory data. Although all Gail did was write down the collective consciousness of this particular time, but my body registered uh, in my solar plexus and tearing up. In the class I was in yesterday, there was a statement, and the statement was just a statement, and it said we have it all backwards. I'm paraphrasing that we have been taught that objective uh, reality, the objective reality is real, is a real world, and that subjective reality is not. But an objective, and they are two forms of reality. We talk about realities of unity, realities of separation. They were talking about realities that are objectified and realities that are subjectified. And I'm oversimplifying, but the point was, he said, we act like if we love somebody, it can't be real because it's not been scientifically proved. And we objectify it. So we often don't stay with our partners, or we don't stay related to people because they don't match some objectification or perception that we think represents love. But actually, what's more real is the subjective love. The love itself is what's more real. And I started bawling. It's like I'd waited centuries for somebody to say that. So when I say the word sensory data, or we start working with language the way we are, it elicits a subjective conversation. It elicits a subjective, a sensory. Subjective means that it moves subjectively. We can't ratchet it down to it. We can't nail it down. Wholeness, being definitionally a state, condition, quality. So it's a quality of whole. It's very good. As wholeness, collective consciousness, two states become more, and enhance. I think you meant enhance everything. and hence everything, and enhance. Very well done. Now, notice the sensory data that comes with this, the tonality, this resonance. This is what we're maturing on these calls. This subjective reality that we can't pin down, we can only experience. That was the other thing that we've made, that the collective conscious over thousands of years have made the experiential experience not real, but it's actually the experiential experience that is real. And I just sobbed just to hear him say it. Men and women. But it was like resurrection. It was like resurrecting the original template of the original design here. It was so beautiful. So now, we're just a little bit in, we're half an hour in. Let's work with ourselves. We don't have to prove anything to anybody. You're only living between your own two ears right now. So, or forever. But just sit with yourself a minute and see if you have a sense of sensory data. It doesn't matter. I know at least one of you has another language that's the primary language for you, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your language is. I could say Epike Anna, and you can still look for that. So just take a minute. Just take a minute, and it doesn't matter what we discern or language it right now. It does matter, but not right now, not this minute. It matters that each of us individually have a sense of being able to subjectively or experientially register sensory data. And by the way, you can't not. If you have wind blowing, or if you have sound around you, or if your hands are on your lap, you have registered sensory data. So it's not like you can't. You can't not register it. But if you feel your hand on your knee or your lap or your chair, just go into that, and that's a sensory data. And what we're after is that sensory data, giving it a place in our physiological feel. Okay, good. It took us a little bit, but we're good. So now let's close the door on our inquiry and our investigation and our engagement. And let's move from what's called last week to this week, this time slot in creation, this Friday at 8 a.m. Montana, in the linear gregarian world that we were born into. But let's have it be a stacking like the spiral. And that last week started the spiral, and now this week we're entering here, this part of the spiral, and we'll keep expanding each week when we come together. So when I sat down, going to that conversation, when I sat down this morning, the opening opened. The opening opened again. And it definitely has a lot of sensory experience, a little bit like a dynamic of existence anticipating our return. I'm doing a body of work called The Guardian at the Gate. It's much like that, only not the specification that I'm working with in The Guardian at the Gate, more like the Magi, the gateways of the Magi. It's more what this experientially registers as. And the opening is now indivisible. In other words, the here and the there have a shared field. All right, so I'm just going to wait a minute. I don't know how long it takes for the comments to pop up on the screen, but this is an interactive time. So I just want now for you to become present to what I just said in this moment of now, this sense of kind of the question experientially, do you have the experience of where you are, not in your house or not in your car or not wherever you are, but where you are non-circumstantially, where you are etherically, or and slash that where I am and where we are. I, the I am, we are, here, there. And then just whatever you want to comment about it. And Gail, I would like you to do your best to define or to speak to the it seeing very quickly. What's the it for you? And listen for tonality as you write. Don't try to get conceptual. Just make sure it feels good when you write it and that it has a sense of connectivity that's sufficient for you. We're not going to get English to become a tonal language. We can only make it tonal by what we're directly experiencing when we say the word. That's why the creation exercises are so imperative during this time. Electra, if you're still on, would you put the link to the next template party or the study of self, whatever's up? You all can always go to any work you want to do with me at my website. But I'm looking for a certain quality of work, so I'm not trying to distinguish the value of it. Very good, Gail. Anyone else? Because our ability to register it, good, Sylvie, our ability to give it a place, give it, in this case, this sense of an experiential field that seems to be sharing space with us. And we don't know what it is. We just have the sense of sharing space. Space, like space. Anyone else? I realize that I'm going to have to start slowing down the work I do because it's used to be that I could build, I still can, that I could build a field within which the systemic nature of the human being could, and do a where, Sarah, and Sylvie, do a what is generating the pressure on your crown chakra. And you still have to go for the it, Gail. You have to get more words, more tonality, more expressive, experiential language. It isn't about getting the right answer. It isn't about being real, what you say. It's about the very struggle is what gives something a place. It's the very struggle to bring sensory data into words that opens up the field, the etheric territory, to the point that it becomes part of our working consciousness. So I realize I'm going to have to really slow down the work I do, which is probably going to have less people participate because the mental perception mind is an addict that needs constant say, say, what do you call it? Satura, not sensation, not sedation. Uh, like it's insatiable. It's insatiable. But it's possible to register something with a single word or a couple of words. And it's literally to build, thank you, satiation. It literally builds a gateway of consciousness, of sensory data to pick up on the greater dimensions of which we're a part that are highly operational at this time. So, because you have the, because it's beautiful to have you be here in this hour. I'm of a definite opinion people wouldn't pay to do this kind of work because it's too slow, doesn't satiate the maniacal, mental, conceptual mind. And I mean that with all truth because this is obviously my Facebook live chat. So it's been fascinating to me. Money for me is going to have to come from another place. No idea where, because I can't not do what I do the way I do it. Because the whole intent is to restore matrices within which new futures can rise. And it's not yet backed by popular appeal. Backed or backed by popular appeal. In other words, in objective reality, the type of work that happens in the field of Tantra Mat is not monetarily valuable. In a subjective or an experiential reality is also not considered monetarily valuable. But as a psychic, I can promise you that you're going to watch a real change in that over the next 6 years. It's a good phrase. What I'm going to put it in a sentence. I think it's really important that we become sensorially satiable, satisfied. Satisfied's not really a good word. Satiable is perfect. We need to become sensorially satiable. If we do that, by the way, we'll protect the lining of our intestines, will help coat the neural pathways in our body, will help strengthen the blood flow because the body is missing its sensorial nourishment. Okay, I think that's as far as we can go today. I'm well satisfied because there's stages of unification. They're really important, even if there's not a conscious relationship with it in words. But when you are in that sensory data, it's not independent of world. Sensory data occurs in world. And the real gift of being sensorily tuned is the sensory data gives you its world, but our conceptual perception, it can't register there. And we don't have the ability to register worlds that are not operating in the circumstantial world, circumstantial physical world at this time for your contemplation. Another good thing to put on here. People come in and read your comments, by the way. It's really lovely. It really does support people. Very happy about that. And you don't need to make me happy, but I'm really glad I am. So the first register of a world, not the world, but a world, unknown, uh, is sensory data. Because sensory data comes from a world. And then the second stage is that there's an opening into the sensory data, through the sensory data, into a sense of something spatial, something there. And there's a sense of you being here. Here could go two ways. Sense of you being here and it being there, or in increments of state shifts. It could be that you have this sense of being here and there, that I'm more that way. But there is a world, and here is a world, largely circumstantially thought driven, right? I mean, word thought driven. And when we go into that sensory data, we're in touch with a world that is either there, that is there because it's not here, or else we would have the ability to say that's a chair. If there was a chair in that world, not that we don't, it isn't yet here because we haven't articulated it so it can be here. Very simply said, that's why the creation exercises are so valuable. Because we articulate worlds here so they can have a presence here in this circumstantial, largely word thought driven world. Conceptualized, not real, the illusion, the bad dream. So then the kind of next stage somewhere inside of that is that then we're here there, like we're one. We're here there, or we're one. We call that a shared field. That's well said, Christine. The thing about sensory data, it's why I sometimes sound so smart, is it's not my mental mind. My mental mind is lined up with the data. So that when you hear me, you may not be able to conceptualize what I say, but you have a tonal register. There's a resonant listening that occurs, and that comes from sensory data. And one of the ways to mature that capacity is through the creation exercises. But you're going to have to want the capacity. That's right. Well said. And that's true for Latin. Latin actually carried the 1-1. So let's go through it again. First, you have a sensation, sensory data. If it works for you to call it your sentient intelligence is registering sensory data, that's fine. Just be careful about chopping everything up into separate things. The activity, the action is sensory data. And that sensory data has you present to a world that is generating that sensory data. And then the only other thing you have to pay attention to, because we don't yet have access to being present to that world. In other words, we don't have our own uh, mental word registers for that world. But we do have the sensation of being there and through sensory data and us being here. Then the next thing that happens is you will have an experience of I'm both here and there. And then you have an experience of we are here there because it's now a shared field, which we often call a unified field or oneness or wholeness. Yeah, sensation. Yeah, sensory data is the action. Yeah, beautiful. Well said, Anne. And to let the mental mind have the issue. Listen, we have a beautiful mental mind. It just hasn't been fed good data. It's another quote. We haven't been fed good data. But when we're fed that good data, we're about to have Lola come out next door, whereupon we will have the background of barking. And I'm going to take a concrete block out of my wall so Lola can sneak in and out between the two houses. I think she'll do better then. So thank you. And that's enough for now. And I'll see you next week. On the 27th of August, strangely enough, I will be doing a very short Facebook Live because I'm getting a CAT scan and I have to get to the hospital in time to prepare, but I don't want to miss doing Facebook Live. So it'll probably be about 10 minutes at the top of the hour, maybe sitting in the waiting room or in the car. But for now, I'll see you next week. Many blessings.